The next conflict management style that we're going to discuss is avoiding. If you'll recall, avoiding indicates a low concern for the self and a low concern for the other. And this ultimately ends up in a lose-lose scenario in most cases. In the avoiding style of conflict management, there is usually no direct communication happening about the conflict. That doesn't mean that there's no communication happening, because we often unintentionally give our feelings away through our verbal and nonverbal communication. But a lot of the communication that does happen in the avoiding style of conflict management happens passively or indirectly. So there's very little information exchange, and this may make this strategy less effective than some of the others that we're going to be discussing. In most cases, avoiding the problem just ends up making the problem worse. Avoidance might have first started as simply changing the subject, but it could potentially progress into avoiding the issue, and then avoiding the person, and then potentially even ending the relationship. So avoiding the problem isn't necessarily going to make the problem go away. A lot of people choose to deal with conflict using passive aggression. And this behavior is a way of dealing with conflict in which one person indirectly communicates their negative thoughts or feelings through nonverbal behaviors, such as not completing a task they were asked to complete. And passive aggression can feel really rewarding to the person who's doing it in the moment, but it's truly one of the most unproductive ways to deal with conflict. And it might create additional conflicts and lead to a cycle of passive aggression. So ultimately, both parties are going to lose out. All of that being said, however, avoidance can be appropriate in some situations. For example, when the conflict is temporary, or the stakes are very low, or there's little personal investment, or especially when there's the potential for violence or retaliation, it might just not be worth it to engage in this conflict. And so it might be appropriate for us to avoid it instead. As an example, when I was in college, I had a not so great roommate situation. Myself and these other two people were just opposites in a lot of different ways. We had different schedules, different personalities, and we didn't get on, to say the least. And we had a couple conversations throughout the year trying to solve some of the problems that we had. But ultimately, it got to a point where we all knew that May was coming, that the end of the school year was coming, and that we would no longer be in that living situation for much longer. And that none of us really wanted to engage in a relationship beyond this roommate situation anyway. And so as a result, we simply avoided each other, avoided talking about the issue, because it was a temporary situation. We didn't have an investment in the relationship, and it just didn't seem worth it to engage in conflict. So it can be appropriate in some situations like that. But for the most part, avoiding the problem just makes it worse, and it ends up in a lose-lose situation, because it reflects the fact that we don't really care about ourselves and our own needs, nor do we care about the needs of the other person. So that is the avoiding style of conflict management.